And then this guy publishes this book about child sex exploitation. Anyways, he was the headmaster of a school called the Dalton School in New York. And while he was the headmaster, a young Jeffrey Epstein was selected to become a math teacher at this school. Jeffrey Epstein, by the way, was just 21 at the time. Donnie Barr's the headmaster. Jeffrey Epstein becomes a math teacher. And I got to tell you why that's weird. First and foremost, because Jeffrey Epstein only had a high school degree. He didn't have any teaching certifications. He had dropped out of this mathematics program at NYU. Yet under Donald Barr's stewardship, while he's writing this book on the side, Jeffrey Epstein is plucked from obscurity to teach at one of the most prestigious schools in Manhattan. So prestigious, by the way, that today, tuition is $65,000 per year. By the way, I should tell you, Barr himself was a bit controversial. He actually made several unconventional hires at this school during his tenure. And soon after Jeffrey was hired as a teacher, he had to resign amid some controversy. I'm not going to get down that rabbit hole for you, but yeah, he's an interesting character. And you are probably not going to be shocked, but while Epstein was there as a teacher, he was inappropriate with the young female students. He attended parties with them. They spoke about this in the future. Anyways, this unqualified, or at least underqualified, creepy Epstein, who only had a high school diploma, then magically gets a job in finance. Again, zero qualifications. He just somehow became friends with the CEO of Bear Stearns. So in 1976, he joins this firm as a low-level junior assistant to a trader. Because again, he doesn't have any qualifications. So he's just assisting, not even the executive assistant, the junior assistant to a trader. But magically, you guys, you're not going to believe me. Just 4 years later, that junior assistant, Jeffrey Epstein, became a partner of the firm. I kid you not. He was made a partner of the firm at the age of 27 with zero financial background. It's giving Emmanuel Macron. It's giving like someone more powerful is just kind of pulling me up through the ranks. And I'm allowed to do that for whatever reason. I don't know. That's just, I'm getting a vibe here. It just sounds very familiar to me. Anyways, just 1 year later, he actually had to leave that firm, even though he just made partner, because he was found guilty of an SEC violation. So partook in a little bit of fraud, very quickly had to resign. But it's all good because then he just started his own consulting firm, because obviously he's super qualified to do that, to start consulting for billionaires and governments, because that's what he did. He establishes like Epstein & Co. at the age of 28, and he begins consulting for governments and extremely wealthy clients. Some of those clients, by the way, who have embezzled funds from people. I'll give you just one example. This guy, Stephen Hoffenberg, hired Epstein in 1987 as a consultant for his Towers Financial Corporation. And while Jeffrey Epstein was consulting for Towers Financial Corporation, they happened to take part in the largest Ponzi scheme ever recorded until Bernie Madoff came some years later. Oh, darn. Once again, Epstein's just caught up in a little bit of fraud. But that didn't give the other elites, the other millionaires and billionaires, any pause to continue working with him. No, they just kept hiring this guy. And his most significant consulting relationship began with Leslie Wexner. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you, it has been alleged that Epstein made millions because he was managing Leslie Wexner's affairs, millions. Far cry from billions, but Leslie, you might recognize Wexner because he is the owner of many retail stores. Abercrombie & Fitch, Victoria's Secret, I think is probably the one that he's most known for. Lane Bryant, just the L brand in general. Leslie, for whatever reason, just felt that Jeffrey Epstein should just be given control of everything. Power of attorney, make hiring decisions, firing decisions. He really empowered this Jeffrey Epstein. And for whatever reason, while Epstein was empowered, when executives at the company would come forward and say, hey, this Jeffrey Epstein is kind of a creep. He's posing as a recruiter for Victoria's Secret models. And he's getting access to these women. That was completely ignored. Of course, we know what happens next. Epstein, or during this time frame, he is throwing parties for the elite of the elites. Everyone who wasn't anybody is obviously at a Jeffrey Epstein party. He is the guy to know. His sidekick there, Ghislaine Maxwell, we'll discuss her briefly in a bit. Fast forward to 2006, bad year for our boy Epstein. Bad year. In early 2006, Epstein was actually charged in Florida with multiple counts of molestation and unlawful sexual activity with a minor. Now, to be clear, the FBI was able to confirm for 34 minors. They were able to confirm their stories had been corroborated, that they had been abused by him. That number was then increased to 40 by the time he signed this really interesting plea deal. Okay. Now, to just let you know what he was up to, the details from the investigation included allegations that 12-year-old triplets were flown in from France, interesting place, for Epstein's birthday, and then flown back following the day after they had been sexually abused by him. It was alleged that the young girls were being recruited from Brazil, from South American countries, from former Soviet countries, Europe, and that a certain Jean-Luc Brunel, who ran the modeling agency, which was funded by Epstein, known as MC2, was supplying these young girls to Epstein. Now, Jean-Luc Brunel, again, we're not going to get sidetracked here. He's a French guy. A lot of things that are just going to cross with the Epstein and the French and everything we've uncovered about Emmanuel Macron. But we can't speak to Jean-Luc today because you're not going to believe this, guys. Jean-Luc got arrested, and when he was in a cell, he committed suicide by hanging himself. Yeah, so that's another dead end. He committed suicide, sadly. Anyways, oddly, Jeffrey Epstein, despite everything, all of his guilt, he was delivered this amazing deal. Caught red-handed. And yet, Alexander Acosta, who was then the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, handed him a very light sentence. And the deal was incredible, okay? First and foremost, the deal granted immunity to any of his potential co-conspirators. So it's like they're investigating Fez. And they're like, okay, this guy's got something to do. All these people, everyone's involved. We're just going to go ahead and grant immunity to those people. The prosecutors also agreed that they would keep the deal that they made with Jeffrey Epstein a secret from his victims, so that the victims could not challenge it in court. So they just get a phone call. They found out that Jeffrey Epstein, we already dealt with that. He actually signed what's known as a non-prosecution agreement with federal prosecutors. So in the end, he pled guilty to just one count of solicitation of prostitution and one count of procurement of minors for prostitution. And what they gave him was a sentence of 13 months in county jail. And I want to be clear that when he got sentenced this, he was allowed to leave to work at his office and to go for walks. In fact, this part is actually so incredible that I want to read this straight from the Wikipedia page because I can't even do it justice. Now, Wikipedia is just pulling, you can go and fact check these. This is from like the Washington Post, other sources, but it reads, while most convicted sex offenders in Florida are sent to state prison, Epstein was instead housed in a private wing of the Palm Beach County Stockade. That's the sheriff's office, just so you guys are clear. He was just housed in a private wing of the sheriff's office. And according to the sheriff's office, was for 3.5 months allowed to leave the jail on work release for up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. So for 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to leave. Now, when he was actually in his private cell, the door was open. Epstein's cell door was left unlocked, and he had access to the attorney room where a television was installed for him. Let me make it clear. So he is not only allowed to leave his room whenever he wants, allowed to leave the sheriff's office for 12 hours a day, including one day of the weekend, because it's 6 days a week. They also went through an effort to install a television for him in the attorney's room. Not even the attorneys got that, but they installed one for him. Okay, great. That's before they moved him into their previously unstaffed infirmary. Now, the sheriff's office, if you're wondering what they got, Jeffrey Epstein, right before he turned himself over, he established this not-for-profit. And from that not-for-profit, while he was in jail, he paid the sheriff's office $128,000. And that was for extra service that they had provided him during his work release. And what extra services did they provide Jeffrey Epstein during his work release? Well, he wanted to make sure that his office, his off-campus office, was monitored by permit deputies and that their overtime was paid for by Epstein. And he made sure that those deputies that were coming with him to work wore suits and that they checked in his guests at his front desk. So the sheriffs, while he was going to work, came with him. He paid them for overtime. He wanted them to wear suits, and they were responsible for checking in his guests. This is while he's in jail serving his sentence. Okay. Now, later, the sheriff's office would say that the guest logs were destroyed. So we don't know who they were checking in for. Anyways, Epstein served almost 13 months, if we're calling that serving, before he was released in 2009 for a year of probation on house arrest. Now, I want to be clear, house arrest for Jeffrey Epstein looked a little different, okay? While on probation, he was allowed to go on numerous trips because he doesn't have just one house, you guys. So he was allowed to take his corporate jet to his residences in Manhattan, in the U.S. Virgin Islands. He was also, because you can imagine he didn't get a lot of exercise in his houses, he was allowed to go on long shopping trips and walks all around Palm Beach for quote unquote exercise. Actually, I actually do think he probably had a gym in all these houses. But the point is he wanted fresh air exercise. So he needed these long walks throughout Palm Beach. Epstein was also allowed to use his own driver to drive him between jail and his office and other appointments. Now, you're probably thinking around now, why on earth would Alex Acosta agree to that? What's he doing? Why would you allow this man guilty as sin to essentially just run a sheriff's office for a few months and then do whatever he wants thereafter? Well, Alex Acosta faced a lot of pressure when Trump nominated him for Secretary of Labor. And he told reporters years later that it wasn't in his control. He said, quote, I was told that Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone, and that Epstein was above my pay grade. Excuse me, above the pay grade? The Attorney General of the Southern District of Florida? Who exactly is paying Epstein? What colony of COSARs, what are we calling them, could be so powerful, almost bored with their power, if we're going back to this space book, bored with their power, that they would allow this to take place and have confidence, know fully well that even if they get caught, who cares? I mean, you'd have to be so powerful and so politically extremist, like that book suggests, that you could, like, I don't know, sink the USS Liberty, maybe shoot a sitting president in broad daylight while you're at it, and still have politicians referring to you as friends and allies. Anyways, let's not get lost here. There are some more interesting facts about Jeffrey Epstein. One, he had a working fake passport. That's incredible. He had an Austrian passport with a totally fake name that placed his residence in Saudi Arabia, and it worked. So yeah, he was a Fed. Obviously, he was very high up in the deep state, and he used this passport to enter countries throughout the 1980s, when he was very young, the 1980s, guys, including the United Kingdom, Spain, Saudi Arabia. He also had a very compelling interest in artwork, okay? And you've probably seen this. He had this artwork of Bill Clinton in Monica Lewinsky's dress above his desk. And that's interesting in general, because I don't know if you know this, but President Clinton was blackmailed. He was blackmailed by Israel because they wanted to get this deal done with the Palestinian Authority and also were pressuring him to release one of their assets, Jonathan Pollard. Now, Jonathan Pollard, to give you a background here, was another agent of Israel. He was actually a CIA analyst who was found guilty and went to prison for 30 years for spying on behalf of Israel. So he worked for the U.S. government, but he was spying on behalf of Israel. Anyways, this is according to the Times of Israel. Let's take a look at what happened. Netanyahu said to have offered Lewinsky tapes for Pollard. Okay, it reads in this article that Israel attempted to use tapes of the former U.S. President Bill Clinton's steamy conversations with intern Monica Lewinsky to leverage the release of Jonathan Pollard. That's at least what the book regarding the Clinton family was claiming. The book is entitled Clinton Inc., and the subtitle is The Audacious Rebuilding of a Political Machine. And the author, Daniel Halper, relies on the record interviews with former officials, together with a close analysis of documents that were termed the quote unquote Monica files. And it tells the story of one of the most prominent political families in the United States, being the Clintons. According to the author, the documents indicate that during the Y plantation talks, so these were plantation talks it was held on the Y plantation in Maryland, okay, between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. And Bill Clinton was in the middle of this because, there's always drama happening there in 1998. And Netanyahu wasn't getting what he wanted. So Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, our dear friend and ally, pulled Bill Clinton aside, and he presses, first and foremost, for the release of Jonathan Pollard. This is directly from the Times of Israel article. I'm going to read this quote. The Israelis present at Y River had a new tactic for their negotiations. They'd overheard Clinton and Monica, and they had it on tape. Not wanting to directly threaten the powerful American president, a crucial Israeli ally, Clinton was told that the Israeli government had thrown the tapes away. But the very mention of them was enough to constitute a form of blackmail, Halper wrote, adding that, quote, according to information provided by a CIA source, a stricken Clinton appeared to buckle. Our friend and ally is at it again, you guys. Yep, they're at it again. Hey, just want to let you know, I have tapes of you with Monica Lewinsky, but I'm going to throw them away. Oh, I don't know. Why do you have tapes of what took place in the White House? What's going on? Should we ask questions? No, we shouldn't ask questions. We should never just ask questions. Anyways, yes, obviously, the entire world knows that Jeffrey Epstein was their asset. He was working for them, obviously, okay? From Ghislaine Maxwell and her father's involvement with the Mossad and who attended his funeral. Leslie Wexner, look up everything that he donates to. I mean, he's essentially, he works for Israel. This is like a known fact. But you guys want you to be calm. It's all good. Because now the Department of Justice has come out and they say that Jeffrey Epstein, he had no list. The girl has no name. Here it is next. The DOJ, the FBI conclude that Epstein had no client list and he died by suicide. Nothing to see here. And that's what happened. They made that conclusion. They had no evidence that the convicted sex offender and disgraced financier, or even calling him that, I don't even know how he's allowed to be deemed a financier, that there was no evidence that he blackmailed powerful figures or that he kept a client list or that he was murdered, according to the memo. And now if you're thinking, didn't we see when the FBI raided his home that there was a photo and he had all of these tapes? That's a lot of stuff. Yeah, here's another photo. It just seems like he maybe had a lot. But no, guys, there's nothing that indicates anything at all. Nothing at all. And they also are releasing some raw and enhanced versions of footage of the Manhattan prison where Epstein was held the night that he died. And they say that the video supports the medical examiner's findings that Epstein died by suicide. And the footage is hilarious. Just like one image of see, no one walks towards his cell. I mean, okay, here it is, guys. I guess that means since no one entered the cell this way, that it's totally impossible that anybody entered another way. It's totally impossible that anything else happened because look, we're showing you the footage, friends. It's over. Look away. Now the nation that cared so much about Jonathan Pollard that they blackmailed Clinton to try to get him back. And when that failed, they still were able, by the way, to get Jonathan Pollard. He received a pardon in 2021. Incredible. Guilty. Fully admitted that he is guilty. Israel has admitted that he received a pardon in 2021 from President Trump. I'm not kidding. They said this would go a long way in just healing, tensions between Israel and America. And so even though he was already out of prison, they felt that this next step should be taken, which is to say, just wipe his record clean. And President Trump did that in 2021. And then what Jonathan Pollard did as soon as he got that pardon was he got on a plane and went to Israel and was greeted on the tarmac by President Netanyahu.